Good morning. Today I'm here to talk about something we do better than any other jurisdiction in Canada. When it comes to finding red tape and cutting it, Alberta is absolutely the best. In the last 6 years, we have been the best province in Canada at reducing red tape. Since 2019, we have eliminated more than 209,000 regulatory requirements and undertaken hundreds of red tape reduction initiatives. All this work has resulted in more than $2.9 billion in cumulative savings for Albertans. This work also resulted in another top grade from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Last month, we received a grade of A on the CFIB's Provincial Red Tape Report Card, and that was the best mark in Canada. Also in January, CFIB named Alberta as one of its One to Watch award recipients across Canada, thanks to our new automatic yes policy framework. And that brings us to today. So much of our work involves meeting and speaking with Albertans who tell us how we can cut red tape. But each year, our work brings us here. I'm happy to speak to you today about Bill 38, the Red Tape Reduction Statutes Amendment Act 2025. Bill 35 is the 9th red tape reduction bill that we've brought forward since 2019. If passed, Bill 38 would amend 7 pieces of legislation across 5 different ministries. One set of the bill's amendments will make changes to the Boundary Surveys Act on behalf of Forestry and Parks. The Boundary Surveys Act specifies Alberta's responsibilities associated with any survey and demarcation of the boundary line between Alberta and the Northwest Territories and our 2 neighboring provinces. Alberta's boundaries with Saskatchewan, the Northwest Territories, and the northern portion of British Columbia are defined as conventional boundaries governed by markers connected by straight lines. However, the central and southern part of our boundary with British Columbia is sinuous boundary, largely defined by natural watershed lines, including the divide of the Rocky Mountains. As such, this boundary may have several small changes over a short period of time due to transformations in the landscape, such as rock slides, erosion, or glacier melt. Under the current legislation, we work with our counterparts in the BC and federal government to survey and potentially convert sections of sinuous boundary to a conventional line when necessary. However, to alternate any provincial boundary in Canada, it requires an amendment to the Federal Constitution Act. If passed, Bill 38 would remove the requirement to hold a referendum when routine changes are required to the Alberta-BC border, saving both time and money. These changes would benefit current survey work that is ongoing along the length of the provincial boundary, as other areas along the border will also likely require adjustment. As sinuous boundaries are open to interpretation, converting the border to conventional lines will support future development projects or recreational activities in the area, as it would improve clarity of which provincial operators are required to apply to or necessary permits as well as approvals. It also brings Alberta's legislation in line with that of BC and further supports provincial jurisdiction, sovereignty, and property rights. Bill 38 also contains 2 different sets of amendments on legislation we're happy to make on behalf of advanced education. One set will amend the Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Legislation Act. This legislation oversees apprenticeship education and industry training programs in Alberta, including the issuance of academic credentials to individuals who successfully complete the programs. Proposed changes would clarify the legal responsibility and duties of trade unions, employers, organizations, and occupational associations to the apprentices they sponsor. These changes benefit apprentices by ensuring that all sponsors, including unions, employers, organizations, and occupational associations, operate under a clear and consistent legal framework. Furthermore, this clarity will ensure apprentices receive the high-quality on-the-job training they need for better career outcomes. The other set of amendments we're proposing on behalf of advanced education involves the Post-Secondary Learning Act, which governs Alberta's post-secondary institutions. The proposed changes would allow student associations to simplify their legal organization, reducing red tape and costs. Specifically, it would allow for the consolidation of duplicate student associations into single entities and eliminate redundant operating costs and filing fees that associations pay each year for incorporating separate entities. Ultimately, these cost savings would lead to lower administrative expenses for student associations and consequently reduced membership fees for students. Another change in the bill, if approved, would remove unnecessary requirements so the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate can focus resources on recommendations to improve services for vulnerable children and youth, leading to more timely focused improvements. These changes will help focus the Child and Youth Advocate on children and youth currently or recently receiving child intervention services, leading to a more efficient recommendation process so the government can make systematic improvements faster. An important role of reducing red tape is finding and eliminating legislation or regulation that's no longer relevant or in use. Currently, the Energy Diversification Act does not support any current programs or new initiatives. All programs under the Act are either complete or have been discontinued, or they've been moved to the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program. If Bill 38 is passed, the Energy Diversification Act would be repealed, ensuring that Alberta's energy sector continues to be aware of the resources and programs available to them. I'll close by highlighting a couple of sets of amendments that belong to my department, Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction. One of the proposed amendments would make changes to the Residential Tenancy Act, which covers the relationship between landlords and tenants in Alberta. Currently, the Act requires that notices, orders, and documents such as notices of eviction, lease, cancellation, or rent increase be served personally or by registered mail. Landlords can also post notice in a conspicuous location on the residential premises in cases where a tenant is absent or evading receipt. Those are the preferred methods. But when these methods aren't possible, the Act allows for service of materials by electronic communication, which the Act currently describes as being a fax. The amendment we're proposing would expand electronic communication to include other electronic communication like email, because as we all know, there aren't many places that still use fax machines these days. To be clear, we're not proposing that email replace all other forms of communication. In fact, we would still require the preferred methods to be in person, by registered mail, or by public posting. Electronic service like email will only be permitted as an alternative when these traditional methods have proven ineffective. This would ensure that tenants or landlords without reliable internet access can still properly serve documents to each other. The other set of amendments from my department covers the Charitable Fundraising Act. This act sets the standards for charitable organizations and professional fundraisers soliciting contributions. It also helps protect the public from fraudulent, misleading, or confusing solicitations. Our amendments would allow for the appointment of a director of charitable fundraising with the appropriate administrative and decision-making authority to oversee the day-to-day application of the Act. This would ensure that the decisions and actions necessary to support charitable organizations and protect consumers can be carried out more quickly and efficiently. A director of charitable fundraising would have the authority to appoint inspectors, ensuring that frontline supports exist to effectively carry out oversight and enforcement action that ensures that fundraising activities are appropriate. This move would align us with other similar pieces of legislation in my department, like the Consumer Protection Act and the Condominium Property Act, which are also overseen by designated directors. Because Albertans are so generous with their money and because they support a lot of great causes in our province, we want to make sure that they're protected and that these amendments will help support just that. As I mentioned earlier, this bill covers a unique set of amendments, not only for what they cover, but who they impact. Bill 38 will help renters, landlords, post-secondary students, and those in apprenticeship programs. It'll also help landlords along the Alberta-BC border to keep tabs on the property borders and encourage future development where possible. I'm very proud to stand up today and introduce this bill on behalf of my department and those of my 4 other colleagues. And I'm proud of the red tape we will cut for Albertans through this bill, saving time and money. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. That brings us to the end of the formal portion of our conference. We'll move on to media Q&A. As a reminder to all reporters present or on the phone, we have the following people to answer questions for you. Minister Nally. We have time for 1 question and 1 follow-up. We've got a busy day, but we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. For media in the room, if you could just please identify yourself and your publication before you ask, that would be great. We'll go with you first.
Okay, Catherine Grakowski, Alberta Today. So when you're mentioning development and operators on the border. Can you give an example of who's asking for this or who might have been a little bit confused by these city?
Well, this would apply to any stakeholder that is looking to build a ski hill, for example, and they're not sure who to get the permit from, BC or Alberta, because of sinuous borders. So this is just going to make it easier to be able to do that, because in order to do it today, we actually have to go to a referendum. So this is just making it simpler and easier.
And the changes to the reporting for the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate, did Terry Pilton actually ask for this?
Well, we engaged with obviously the advocate as well as other stakeholders, and this is about making it easier for the advocate to do what's right and to empower him to make the correct decision. Because right now he is obligated to investigate everything. We're not going to change that for anyone that's under 18, but there may be circumstances for someone who's over 18 where an investigation is not required. Now, I want to be clear: if an investigation is required, then obviously there would still be one. But he now has the lever to say we're not going to investigate for whatever reason. So we're just empowering him.
What was she saying that this is going to be easier for her?
Sorry, we're gonna have to move on. Next question, please.
All right, I'll follow up on my colleague's question. Also, Cindy Tran with the Edmonton Journal.
Yeah.
So officials had told us this morning that one of the changes being made for the Child and Youth Advocate Act was that now the advocate no longer has to report to the speaker every 6 months because it duplicates existing information, but doesn't having a biannual report actually allow for the implementation of recommendations sooner, since there is a lag when it comes to reviews for certain deaths? Like,
We want the focus to be on advocating for children and less on reporting. And so this is going to put the advocate in a position where they can have more time to do a better job of advocating for children. And so this is about making it simpler and putting them in a better position to represent children.
okay, and on the Charitable Fundraising Act, how does appointing a director of charitable fundraising reduce red tape for organizations, especially if they're able to appoint inspections and such?
Well, if we're actually talking about the actual red tape reduction count, it's very low here. This is not about the red tape count. This is about an outcomes-based approach, and we're able to focus on an outcomes-based approach now because we've cut over 200,000 pieces of regulation, and so in this case, it's going to make life better for Albertans because it's going to elevate this position so that charities who do very important work are not going to have to go through the ministry. They can deal with the director. The fact is that as a minister, I am not going to be able to be as responsive to charitable organizations as a director can. And we've done it for the condos, we've done it in other areas. It will elevate charities in our province, and that's why we think this is good news.
Next question, please.
Janet French from the CBC. So I know this is not your, forestry and parks is not your ministry, but here we are. Can you just explain to me in the simplest terms possible what is required right now to legally change the border between Alberta and BC in this mountainous area, and what would the process be if this bill passed?
Well, this would be it would have to go to referendum today, and so in Alberta, yeah, and
Something about the Constitution, which is confusing.
well, because that's how it's spelled out. But by doing this, we are removing the requirement to go to a referendum for a simple border change where we're just going from something sinuous to a straight line. Obviously, we're not talking about a significant carving up of the border. That still would fall under the Constitution, and a referendum would be required. This is just for cases where it's a sinuous border, and we're just making some changes because we want to make it a straight line, or there was a landslide or something like that.
Just to clarify though, like, how big of an area are you talking about? How, like, is there a size where you're like, oh, that doesn't need a referendum, but?
No, we haven't defined it by size. We've just defined it in cases where it's not demarked by a straight line, and where it's more of a porous border.
Okay, just to.
Bodies of water, things like that.
Okay, just to follow up on Kat's question, I don't think we got a clear answer to whether or not the child and youth advocate is on board with what you're doing here? Did she say, yeah, cool, I want this, this is gonna make my life easier?
Yeah.
Or did you get pushback from her saying, well, actually, I'm concerned about?
Yeah. I didn't do the consultation, so you'd have to ask the minister that question.
Sorry, we're running short on time, but if you have any further questions, I recommend you send an email to the relevant ministry. Happy to get that answered for you. I'd like to move on to the line for any reporters that have any questions. Operator, could you put the first one through?
Emily Williams with CBC Edmonton.
Hi there. I'm wondering about the changes to student associations. Could you explain some of the duplication that's happening with fees a little bit more?
Sorry, with respect to the fees?
Yeah, you mentioned like this is reducing red tape for student associations because right now, because of some duplication that's happening, they're potentially paying more than they need.
Okay, yeah,
to incorporate
thank you.
themselves.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, this is just providing some clarifying terminology, and it's going to simplify the legal organization, so we don't have to have multiple student organizations. It would be easier for them to go to one organization, which would allow them to have either one fee or hopefully a smaller fee.
Any follow-up, Emily?
Okay. Yeah, and like, where did this come from? Were student associations asking for those changes, and what consultation went into that?
Well, I can specifically tell you in this case that actually the students at NAIT asked for this. And so this is something that would be, I would expect this would be embraced by most students because it's going to make their life easier, hopefully make it a little bit more affordable.
Thanks. Can we move on to the next question, please?
Lisa Johnson with the Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking my question. You differentiated between advocating for children and reporting on government practices that affect children in care. Can you please clarify whether you think the Office of the Child and Youth Advocate is failing to advocate for children currently by reporting regularly on things like death of children in government care?
No, I would say that they are doing a good job, but this is simply amending the legislation so that they can refocus some of the authority on what they're supposed to be doing. But to be clear, we think they're doing a great job.
Thanks for that. I think the clarity issue here is whether or not Terry Pelton asked for this. If you can't clarify whether Terry Pelton asked for these changes, who do these changes benefit? The government?
Well, it benefits the children. But in terms of the consultation, I didn't ask the minister who the stakeholders were that were engaged, but I'll let you direct that question to the minister directly.
Thank you. Can we go to the next question, please, operator?
Brett McKay with Great West Media.
Yeah, first, with the changes to the landlord and tenancies, you said electronic communications like email. Does this include other electronic communications, and if so, could you list them?
Well, no, I can't list them, but we deliberately kept the legislation open on this. As other communication becomes available, it could be included. So what the requirement is we want something that has a date stamp or a read receipt. So social media, for example, wouldn't apply, but certainly email would, a tenant portal, which a lot of landlords have, those type of things. But we deliberately kept it open so that we could include other electronic communications as technology changes.
And the child and family services changes here. Children 18 and up represent the largest age demographic of children who died in care for the last several years. 13 this year, 16 last, 16 the year before that. Could you explain how you will track these negative outcomes if you're removing the requirement to investigate these deaths?
I'm going to have you direct that question to the minister.
Awesome. And operator, anybody else on the line? Okay, excellent. Thanks, everybody. That concludes the time we have available today. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any additional questions, please, my contact information is on the distribution documents, so please send us an email. We'll be happy to get your questions answered.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Minister, I don't understand though, your name is on the bill. You're the sponsor, so how are you saying that you don't know who was talked to? You don't know what's in it?
I didn't do the consultations. The minister would have. So that's why I'm simply saying, look, send those questions to the minister.
Why isn't Cyril Turton here then?
You'll have to ask him that. I'm sorry, but I do have to go.
Sorry, thank you, guys.